Husker fans, we need to sit down right now and have a truthful and honest conversation. Where does Nebraska's offensive line go from here? Because it's clear it's not getting any better. If anything, it is getting dramatically worse by the day, and it is destroying this team. So change is needed. Whether it's at the offensive line coach, we'll talk about it, whether or not we should make a move, brand new starters, brand new depth pieces, and so much more. We'll talk about how we fix this problem, if at all, and what needs to be done. So really quick, this is going to be a brutally honest video. Hit that like button if you're fired up. And also, if you're a diehard Nebraska fan and you're not subscribed, what are you waiting for? For daily content, talking to your favorite team, talking Huskers, it's no brainer. Takes 2 seconds. Hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much. But without further ado, let's talk about it. This is going to be a very honest video. I want your feedback down below in the comment section. Where does Nebraska's offensive line go from here? Because let's call a spade a spade. I told you guys we're going to be honest today. What we saw last Saturday against Michigan State was one of the worst single-game offensive line performances we've seen in the last decade for the Huskers. And we've seen some bad offensive line play. And yet, we played the Spartans, who going into the ball game had one of the worst defensive lines in America. Going into Saturday, they only had 5 sacks on the season. They doubled their count in one game. They had 5 sacks on us. And they probably could have had more. They probably could have had 7, 8, or 9. So it's one thing for our offensive line to get exposed versus Michigan. That's a really good team. They're going to be in the mix for the playoffs. But it's another thing to have your offensive line get exposed against one of the worst defensive lines in the conference. It's clear this unit isn't getting better. It is getting dramatically worse. So let's just rip the Band-Aid off right now and have a conversation around Donovan and Raiola. And then we'll get to all the players, the depth pieces, how we fix this problem. But you've seen social media, you've seen what all Nebraska fans are talking about, whether or not Donovan and Raiola should be on this coaching staff anymore. Okay, a lot of people are calling for his head. He's going to year 4 with Nebraska. He was the only coach that Matt Rhule retained from the Scott Frost era. And a lot of people are saying this should not happen anymore. When you're going into year 4 and you have your guys, you've recruited your pieces, this should not be this big of an issue. Okay, so before we talk about the cons when it comes to Donovan Raiola, I want to give him some credit. I am not of the belief that Donovan Raiola is the worst offensive line coach we've ever had or in America. Like he's average. We know he's average. He may be a little bit above average. He's a decent offensive line coach. Okay, he's a leader of men. You either love Donnie or hate Donnie. There's no in between, and most players love Donnie. He's a great recruiter. He was single-handedly our best recruiter in the class of 24, 25, 26, and in the class of 27 as well. He's going after multiple 5-stars in the class of 27, only positional coach that's doing that. So he's proved that he's a great recruiter. He's a great leader of men. Now, I mean, here's the issue. You got to be a good developer, particularly on the offensive line, okay? Because there are not many freshmen who walk into a program and are ready to play at offensive tackle, offensive guard, or center. Okay, you need to do more development at offensive line than any other position, and our development has fell short. Okay, we don't have a lack of talent. I think that's a huge misconception. Okay, when you look throughout this offensive line, it's a bunch of 4-star, 5-stars, and transfers who are coming in from big-time programs. Okay, all of these guys were highly talented. All these guys have the traits, have the intangibles. But it's one thing to be talented. It's another thing to just not be developed, okay, and not to have technique in the pass pro, not to be down in the running game, not to know your run gaps, to know your scheme, and overall just make mistakes when it matters the most. Okay, Don Raiola has failed when it comes to development, and I'm just going to throw out names. You know, Gunnar Gatula. We'll talk about Gunnar Gatula as the video progresses, but what jump has Gunnar made from year 2 to year 3? It's been a very minimal. What about Justin Evans? What about even a Henry Lateef? All the hype around him. He's played decent this year, but really is he one of the best offensive linemen in the Big Ten? What about some of these depth pieces? It feels like a lot of these offensive linemen never get any better, right? You might be a decent player, but you're never going to take the jump forward to be great. And if you're a bad player, you are never going to take that jump forward to at least be average. That's the issue with Donovan Raiola. So the question is, it's whether or not, the question isn't, will he be fired? We know Donovan Raiola will never get fired, because of the Raiola deep state within Nebraska, the fact that, again, his family has ties all over this university right now. If Donovan leaves, Dylan's entering the portal the next day. And it also should be mentioned that Matt Rhule has never fired a coach since he's been in Nebraska. We had the worst offensive coordinator in America and the worst special teams coordinator in America last year, and he did not have the stones to fire either of them. And they're still on this coaching staff in a lower role. So for better or worse, Donovan Raiola is staying. Okay. But that's not what we're talking about. Should he be fired? That's the question. I'm still of the belief he shouldn't. I think Donovan Raiola should stay. I still believe in him a little bit. And now I'm not saying Donovan Raiola is a perfect coach. I'm not saying he's a great coach even. He's average, maybe a little bit above average at the very best. And it is frustrating this offensive line isn't any better. But I will say this. To me, it's clear that we do not have the pieces. We didn't have the pieces last year. We don't have the pieces this year. We still have a lot of young players who I think are going to be good for us next year, whether it's a President Tomoa, a Grant Bricks, a Jason Machachek, a Sam Sledge. We have a lot of young players on this offensive line who I think Donovan Raiola is actually doing a really good job developing. But it's the older pieces who are still holdovers from the Frost regime who are still killing us, like a Henry Tufsky, like a Justin Evans, like, even a Gunnar Gatula who was recruited initially under Scott Frost, right? All these guys who are really starting and getting primary reps, again, a Teddy Prohaska, a Turner Corcoran, all these guys are still Frost holdovers. So my main issue isn't with Donovan Raiola, it's with Matt Rule, and it's kind of with, some of these other, coaches with Nebraska. We knew the offensive line would be an issue this year. This isn't news to anybody. I was preaching this all offseason long. So why do they think they could get away with only taking 2 offensive line transfers? The fact that we brought in Rocco Spindler, who's been fine, and they brought in Elijah Pritchett, who we'll talk about in a second, who had all these question marks, and they called it good, that wasn't good enough. You needed to bring in 3, you needed to bring in 4, you needed to bring in depth, and you didn't do it. And it was the same deal last year. Last year, they only brought in Micah Mazuka, who barely started for us because he had off-the-field issues. So it's clear we just don't have the talent. What can we do about it going forward? Let's talk about these players specifically. Let's talk about Elijah Pritchett. I think he is the most polarizing player on this team because it's either you love him or you hate him. And I've said this since he transferred here, I just don't think Elijah Pritchett's good. And for whatever reason, when you look at the Pro Football Focus grades, they're always pretty shiny, right? They always look decent. Even last week, I believe he graded out like a 75 according to Pro Football Focus, which is a decent grade. But when you actually turn on the film, you're asking yourself, how is this guy a starter? Okay, and I want to make it clear, Elijah didn't have the worst game in the world versus Michigan State, but he gave up 2 sacks. He gave up, I believe, 5 or 6 pressures on the day. He gave up 2 false starts that came in crucial moments, and he was the primary reason why we couldn't move the football in the second and third quarter. And he was pretty good in the first quarter and fourth quarter. When I was watching the game, I was actually kind of impressed. But as an offensive tackle, you have a very short leash. If you are lights out the entire game as an offensive tackle, but you give up 2 sacks, you played a bad game. That's just the nature of the position. I believe the first round pick for the Patriots, I can't remember his name, coming out of LSU, it was an offensive tackle. He said, if you're a defensive lineman and you get 1 sack a game, you're going to be a first round pick. If you're an offensive lineman and you give up 1 sack per game, you're going to be working at Burger King, right? That's how it works with the offensive line position. So it's clear to me that Elijah Pritchett's not a left tackle. I still want to see him at right tackle. It's crazy that they inserted Elijah into the starting lineup. He got his first start versus Michigan State, but they refused to put him on right. They ended up moving Gunnar to right. Why? Why are we trying to force him at left? I understand left's a more important position. He has a higher potential. He's a higher ceiling, but it's clear he can't play that. And when you go to Alabama and when you look at him at high school, his best reps were at right tackle. So hopefully he gets more reps there because I think he could be solid at right tackle, but it definitely isn't that way at left. Now, people saying he should start. We should just work out this false start issue. We should work out the sack issue. Okay, you're going to get what you asked for. I think it's going to start versus Maryland, but still, man, that's not a good scenario to be in, right? Just because Elijah Pritchett's going to start, just know you're probably going to give up 1 or 2 sacks a game regardless, right? I just don't think it's going to get better because, simply put, he has the talent, but he doesn't have the coaching, man. And I don't think he has the discipline either when it comes to him. But I want to say this about Elijah. I'm not hating on him. He's just not good in the pass pro. He's really good in the running game. He was stellar in the running game. I think that's probably why his Pro Football Focus grade was as high as it was, because he's a dominant run stop, or he's really good in run blocking. But pass pro is just awful. It's just awful, and that's really why he should not be a starter for Nebraska, at least not at left. And then Gunnar Gatula, he actually also graded out pretty well according to Pro Football Focus, which it's the same thing. I don't really understand that, because when you rewatch the game, he gave up 1 sack, he gave up multiple pressures, and I still think Gunnar's getting better. I think he got too much blame against Michigan. He played very well versus Cincinnati, played very well against Akron and Houston Christian. So I think Gunnar Gatula absolutely should be a starter, whether it's at left or right. Feel comfortable with him wherever, but hopefully he can take that step forward. Because the thing about Gunnar is just, he's average. I feel very comfortable saying he's average, but he hasn't ever took that step forward to be above average or to be good or even be great, right? So we need to see that from Gunnar, but I don't think he's a huge issue. Talking about the rest of these starters, Spindler's been okay. Really had a bad game in the run game versus Michigan State, but other than that, he's played all right. Justin Evans was pretty frustrating in the pass pro yesterday, or not yesterday, on Saturday versus the Spartans. It's kind of been that way all year. He's not an upgrade from Ben Scott. We thought he was going to be. It hasn't been that way. And Henry Lateef's been our best offensive lineman. I just want to give him some credit because Henry's been holding down for the most part. As for the depth pieces and whether or not we can actually fix this offensive line, Teddy, see, this is the issue with Pritchett is, although in a perfect world, Pritchett's not a starter on this team, it's not like Teddy is any better. We can't just put Teddy back in the rotation because Teddy's not good. Teddy had one of the worst off-the-tackle performances I've ever seen versus Michigan. So I'm at the point with Teddy where he can be our swing tackle off the bench. You can do a lot worse than him than that at that point. But, Elijah should be our right tackle. Okay, put Elijah at right, put Gunnar at left, put Teddy as your swing tackle and call it good. If Elijah can stink it up, you can put Teddy back in there because Teddy has more experience. But Teddy, man, he's so bad in the run game. He clearly doesn't trust his knees anymore. Like, that's the thing around Teddy where he's tore his ACL so many times. He's had so many lower body injuries. Like, he just doesn't trust his body. So, unfortunately, I just feel like his football days are done. It's unfortunate that he came back for a final year because I just kind of feel like he probably shouldn't have. Let's be real about Teddy. And as for Turner, I actually don't think Turner's played that bad this year, funny enough. Like, Turner's played a little bit of tackle, a little bit of guard here and there. Turner's actually not played terrible. So I just want to give credit where credit's due to Turner. We'll see if his workload increases. So the big question, is this offensive line fixable? Yes, to a degree. I still am of the belief that our offensive line could get to above average by the end of the year. Is our offensive line ever going to be top 20, top 10? No, it won't. But I trust the coaching staff and their belief of this offensive line. They said all offseason long was going to be the strength of this team. I do think we have the pieces, at least from an interior standpoint. We just got to figure out tackle, man. All it takes, in my mind, is Gunnar taking a little bit of a step forward. Elijah Pritchett developing himself in the pass pro, figuring out the false starts. And if you can do just those two things, you go from having a really, really bad offensive line against Michigan State to, holding your own. We're never going to have an offensive line that could dominate the Penn States, the Iowas, the USCs of the world. That's just not happening this year. All I ask is that when you play inferior opponents, you can take care of business. So they got a really tough test this week, though. Maryland is one of the best defensive lines in America. They average 4 sacks a game. It's a quick week, right? You go from Michigan State to Maryland. It's not like we're playing an easy squad. It's a tough team. So we have a lot to work on. All right, guys, let me know your thoughts down below. I told you guys, I think Donovan Raiola should not be fired, but let me know your thoughts on that. Elijah Pritchett, what are your thoughts on him? What are your thoughts on Gunnar and the rest of this offensive line, the depth piece? Let me know what you're thinking. Hey, you've made this far, hit that like button, subscribe. As always, folks, go be great, go on the roll, and I'll see you in the next one.